Hello and welcome to Open Minds UFO Radio. I am your host, Alejandro Rojas, and I am joined with Martin Can-Do Willis.
I can do
yes. Anything. I don't even think that's the right words for that song, but yeah, you can do it. And because you get out there and you're a doer. You know what? We were complaining about some people on social media, and so much of the big complainers, that's what they do. That's it. You know, they're not out there really doing, and I think that's important.
They're complaining.
Yeah, but that's not tough. Anybody can do that.
Yeah, that's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's really easy. It's harder to tackle all the stuff that you do. I was talking about you. Oh, it's race. I saw race this weekend. But actually, I'm going to get into that. But first, I want to tell you who my guest is today.
Great.
Oh, you're going to be shocked and amazed.
Really? Great.
Because it's you. This show is just going to be Martin and I talking about news and some of the latest things that have been going on. So sit back and relax, and we're just going to have a good time here. Now, I do want to say I have some exciting interviews coming up. I have Nick Pope for next week. Of course, he's got some government documents that he has discovered. I saw him this weekend, and we talked something about that, and he's got a lot of really important news to talk about this. He's going to be on some other show, and he promised this show, it's a really big show, so I don't blame him. But I'm not going to say the name because I don't want you to listen, because I want you to hear all this stuff first on my show. But you might already know if you follow Nick Pope. But Nick Pope used to work for the UK, investigating UFOs, and he recently got some information from the DoD about the Pentagon project that was revealed by the New York Times. So we're going to talk about that, and there's a lot of really great points and nuances in these documents that Nick has pointed out that are really important. So we're going to talk about that. And then, speaking of the ATIP program, sometime in the next couple of weeks, hopefully the week after that, I'll be interviewing Mr. Lou Elizondo. So
well, it's about time.
Yeah, I know. And I haven't harassed him on it. He's always said, oh, we got to do an interview. We got to do that. We got to do that. So he actually gave me a call because I hadn't heard from him for a while. And we just were catching up. And I said, hey, would now be a good time? He said, definitely. This is a great time. So we're working on scheduling that. And I asked some people in the Open Minds UFO news group what kind of questions you would like me to ask. And of course, I invite all of you listeners to do so as well. You can email contact@openminds.tv or just email, that will work. Or you can email me at alejandrotrojas at gmail.com and let me know what your questions are, and I'll get those in front of him. Now, a lot of people, unfortunately, and this is kind of funny, they're asking questions that don't pertain to what he does. And so I know the answer is going to be, I don't know about that, or I have nothing to do with that. And it's interesting to me that people do that. Of course, any speaker knows often when you do a whole talk on a topic that's really interesting, and then you open the floor for questions, often people start asking you about stuff that has nothing to do with what you just reviewed, or sometimes nothing to do with, anything you know anything about. And I don't know, people just do that.
Yeah. Now, when I met him last summer, I was all set. I had arranged to have this dinner where you could ask him questions. It was sort of like a one-on-one type thing. And he got whisked away. There was some type of family situation. Now, I never got to do it. I was really looking forward to that, and I had a question to ask him. So I am going to try to dig that up. I can't remember what it was. The only thing he'll remember about the conversation he and I had in the hallway there was talking about collectibles and what he collects and stuff like that. He's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, he's cool. He's a regular dude, and that's what I'm excited to do. So we're going to have him at the Congress, but I'll say this, in interviews, I feel that's when he reveals the most interesting information. So I think we'll have a lot of interesting information in my interview coming up here. But by the time the UFO Congress comes around in early September, we'll have him again. But I'm going to do a Q&A with him. And I know some of my colleagues will probably be jealous about that. But we'll, of course, have open mic. But I want to do my crack. And I think, I want to do my best to really grill him. We're familiar with each other, but in a way that's comfortable to him, to see how much we can get out of him, because that's what people want, is some of the most, some information that is new that he hasn't shared before. And information, there's a lot he can't share. But if you ask the right questions, there are aspects of those topics that he can answer. But if you ask him to do a talk, he's not going to go there. Some people have said, he did a lecture and it was kind of boring like that, or because he's just like promoting To the Stars. But that's what he does. So if you really want pointed answers to certain questions, you've got to go there and then kind of massage it and work around the topic to get everything you can. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. Yeah,
if only we could know what he really knows,
Yeah, I think what he really knows is, I think you can kind of know. We certainly won't know everything he really knows, but the most revealing piece of information. Now, what we're going to review with Nick Pope is interesting, and it has generated some headlines. And I do implore people, if you're not, I've got my live show that I do on YouTube, and it's on my Alejandro Advantage YouTube channel. And I hope you watch that at some time. Of course, if you don't watch it live, you can catch it afterwards. But I review in detail, all of the news of the week. And so this information that Nick Pope shared in this document he received, there was another organization, the Federation of American Scientists, who received these documents. And these were kind of papers, products that came out of this ATIP study that Lou ran. So we have an insight into kind of more of the science that they're looking into, but what they're looking into is very telling, and that's what we're going to talk with Nick. But there's the whole aspect of the UFO end. The only product, and it wasn't included in this list, but that we have been able to see on that end is that leaked Nimitz document that, of course, I talked with Dave Beatty about. I know you've had some quite a few recent interviews on the whole Nimitz situation as well, where I'm sure you all have referenced that document. That's the only by the military, for the military report from that ATIP that we've seen. So I think, and it is terribly interesting, if you've heard our past interviews, but I think that what Lou knows is there's just a lot more of those reports. And that's essentially what he told me, is there's a lot more of that. There's other cases, he says, that are just as good, if not better. But that's kind of the idea. So it's almost like this Project Blue Book show, where they're covering a great case every week. It's like we've seen one episode of the ATIP show, which is Nimitz. So there's other episodes, who knows how many, or even if there's a full season's worth, using that metaphor, but there's just a lot of other great episodes, and that would be interesting. But like Blue Book, it's not necessarily that they retrieved a crash saucer or something, but observed and recorded some incredible cases and incidents. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And you just wonder how many are there, and I think there's still something going on as far as them, doing the research. So you just wonder how many of these cases they're paying attention to now. Nothing really comes to mind as far as like big sightings, except for when it involves the airlines. There's been a couple, within the last few months. But just wondering how much they're still doing the research, and if there's anything, they're researching deeply into.
Yeah, I know. And, this organization has essentially no resources. So they're more of a data retrieval kind of, and perhaps an analyst sort of group than anything, which is what intelligence is about. I mean, if you watch that show like Jack Ryan or something and you hear analysts, the CIA has a bunch of analysts, because what all these people are doing is usually looking at sets of information that they're getting from the field, and they're using that information to understand what's going on about a particular thing. Like what Lou worked on was terrorism, kind of like Jack Ryan, that television show where, and I read all those Tom Clancy books. So, he talks about the analysts, how they're grabbing the data and they're trying to figure something out. And then sometimes they're able to discover, hey, it looks like, this group is doing X, Y, and Z. That indicates maybe they're building a bomb, and so we got to check into this. And it's the same sort of thing they're gathering. And we see this in that report, because that report didn't do any real investigation. What it did, though, was gather testimony, which is good. It's an investigation from witnesses. And then also, given that testimony, questioned people like the submarine that were part of the carrier strike group to see if there was any correlation there or anything that could corroborate what the others had seen or give them more information about whatever phenomena they were dealing with. But that's essentially what they're doing. But it's because it's of that nature, all it can be is kind of analysis as opposed to, being able to do some hands-on research. The other thing that I think is important is that, we have this Atom Project where To the Stars now is trying to examine the material, these metamaterials, or materials that have been allegedly retrieved from UFO incidents, to determine whether or not these materials are anomalous or not. I think that's telling in that, since Lou is doing this work, there's been, and in his interviews, there's been no indication that there has been any material besides the one mentioned retrieved. And what we know about, at least this material that was retrieved, that there's analysis still ongoing. So it kind of lends to the idea that no anomalous material has yet been, fully analyzed or probably discovered by the ATIP group. I think that that's what it seems, and we can ask Lou, more specifically, and I think we have essentially, but that still lends to most of what they've done is kind of analysis. But those files have to be fascinating.
Oh, I'm sure.
Nimitz is an amazing case, so if they have cases better than that, holy cow.
Right. Now, forgive me if I'm getting this mixed up or wrong, or we've already talked about it in the past, but does this have to do with what is supposed to be housed at Bigelow's? That is, yeah. That's one of the items. That's one of the pieces of material. But they have others as well. Some that have been brought to them by other UFO witnesses outside of ATIP. And I think some that other UFO researchers have obtained as well. So, yeah. And I think they're preparing to at least give the public some more information. There is rumors about television shows and stuff. So there might be a show that kind of talks a little bit about what they're looking into coming up here. So we'll see. Mm-hmm. One of the things that people often say to me, and I'm sure you probably hear it too, is, whatever it is got all the way here. Why on earth would it crash? Is that,
I agree. I personally, and I've said this many times, and I'm sure, some people don't like it, but oh well, I'm honest. I don't see it. I don't see crashes happening. In fact, let's say Roswell was a truly crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft, an advanced technology. I think if that had crashed, and there was some sort of, and they didn't want to interact with us at all, then I think they would very easily be able to retrieve it. I mean, since it had crashed, it could probably even just fly in a saucer, pick up everything, even if there are some army guys standing there, with their jaws on the ground watching this happen, and then fly off. And the army, first of all, probably isn't going to say anything. Even if those guys who saw this did say something, nobody's going to believe them. And it would be problem solved. So I think there's a strong, using that kind of perspective, I think there's a strong, personally, argument to be made that if there was truly a crash and we retrieved that material and we're allowed to keep it, then we were given. It wasn't a crash. It was, here's some technology. Here you go. For whatever reason, we feel you're ready to move to the next level of tech or whatever. And I mean, if Colonel Corso, who was in the Army, who claims he received some of that material, is telling the truth, then a lot of the technology that we use to this day and have advanced us to where we are technologically is due to the back engineering or incorporation of some of that technology that they got from Roswell. And so, it has had a major effect on our growth and evolution. So maybe they are helping push us along, or maybe it hasn't happened at all and there hasn't ever been a crash. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, one of the theories, of course, is that it's, a drone or drone piloted or self-replicating drone or something like that, when it comes to them trying to deal with the space-time, the space, travel and all that, speed of light. So I don't know. There's all. I think we're thinking about the whole thing in a human way, and who knows what the real answer is.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all good points. I mean, and there's been lots of speculation that, and it would make sense. And a lot of scientists are even more ready to adopt this idea. In fact, Seth Shostak has even talked about it. And so has that Columbo guy, or Columbus, who wrote this paper for the SETI Institute convention. Right. That, we keep thinking that any beings out there wouldn't be able to survive this trip, but, a robot essentially could. So who's to say there aren't drones? And people seem to be more open to that idea. So that's a possibility as well. Of course, if there's a ton of them, you'd think there might be several crashes or something like that, if that does happen. But who knows, huh?
Right. Now, do you think that Lou would be privy to anything that To the Stars is working on? Or are they compartmentalized as far as, the materials and things like that? Or do you think that they kind of share the information that they're not letting out to the public with, between the people involved? I'm
pretty sure they share it with each other.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that way. It doesn't sound like they're compartmentalizing from each other. I don't completely know how the structure works, but they're a pretty small group. So I think they're all working together pretty closely because they are a small group. So
now I know you and I have talked about this before, and mostly you, about their becoming, if they're going to become more transparent when it comes to something like this. What do you think would happen if they actually, studied the material and ended up being something they couldn't, they just couldn't identify as something that was, human made or made on Earth?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that a lot of people would say, you got to tell people right now. But I don't think that's the wisest way to do it. And I know people get frustrated by that, but it's best to have all your ducks in a row before coming out. So, for instance, it would be wise for them to have, like scientists do, develop a complete paper for peer review that makes your argument as strong as possible so that you can get it out there, and then, then you have your strongest argument coming out first. And that takes a lot of time to develop, especially if you, for instance, it's often that you need to do many pieces of analysis. One analysis you do shows that this nature, is anomalous. That justifies then you doing more research. And if you continue to get these anomalous, results, then you're pushed to do more and more, which all bolsters your case that something is odd about what it is you're looking at. So the better the case, the longer it's going to take to investigate and analyze, and so it's going to take a longer time to develop that paper or argument that it is something demonstrating what analysis you did and why you think it's anomalous. So it's just going to take a lot of time. So I think that that's the thing, is that if they did have something, they wouldn't share it. I think it would be wise for them not to share it, beyond maybe saying something like, we do have some promising leads, and we're working on those, and we're working towards sharing more information with the public on this as soon as possible.
I understand. I understand what you're saying about, doing it the right way. I'm just wondering, even if it's done the right way, how much of a blip is this? Would something like that make? Would people consider it serious enough, do you think? Or do you think they would just say, well, that's just saying that they don't, that's just saying they have no idea how it's made, and that's it. It's not going to, I
think it will be a serious blip. Here's why.
You do.
I think that who is saying it matters a lot. So, for instance, if you or I, no offense to you, but it's the same for me, if I was to say, Open Minds TV has done this analysis and here's what we found. And I think we have a pretty good reputation with the mainstream. So, but even then, it's not as big of a deal. But when you have, somebody connected to the Mellon family or the Mellon, dynasty, you have these ex-intelligence people, you have somebody who ran a department for the DOD investigating this stuff. When a group like that comes out and says, we have scientific evidence that this anomalous material is created by an intelligence that is off planet, I think that's a big deal. Just like if any other scientific organization, like if SETI was to say, we think we found something, I think that is a big deal. And so it will get a lot of attention. It'll get a lot of scrutiny, which is good. That's what you want. You want to encourage, the scientific organizations, SETI, others, to challenge your assumptions, because that means they're taking it seriously. And then you go from there. So I think from this group, it will be a big deal.
Now, do you think, this is probably a question you may not even want to answer, but do you think that Tong DeLong's involvement with this would take away from it?
No, I don't think so at all. And I think that's what a lot of people in the UFO field are kind of missing, is that, and we have plenty of evidence of this, that it won't have an effect, because Tom got those doors opened in the first place. Why and what is his role? And I think that's what people need to think about. In the professional world, we all have titles. And the reason you have those titles, it's because that's what your expertise is. That's what you bring to the table. Tom DeLong is a rock star. So essentially what he brings to the table is a perspective from the youth and a media perspective, not a scientist or an expert or anything like that. He brings that media connection. And I think that's what his importance is. But we do have to go to break, but I want to elaborate more on this because I think this is an excellent question that the UFO field is just getting wrong. And I'm going to justify my answer when we come back from the break. You're listening to Open Minds UFO Radio. We're here with Martin Willis. Yo, Martin.
Yo.
We'll be right back from this break. Welcome back to Open Minds UFO Radio. I'm your host, Alejandro Rojas, and we have with us Martin Willis of Podcast UFO.
I forgot what Can Do. Yeah. I was telling you to say Mush Brain.
Martin Mush Brain Willis.
That's right. Yeah.
You don't sound too mushy-brained.
Well, I'm hanging in by a thread. But yeah.
Getting back to the Tom DeLonge thing, is, we were all doubtful when he said that he was talking to insiders in the government and in the military. But it turned out it really was going on. And if you read some of that stuff, it seems like this sense that they like the idea. And he had talked about this, of him being an outlet to the youth to try to get an interest in science piqued by people out there. So, that's Tom's role. Tom is seen by the mainstream. And here's my argument as to, why the evidence that I'm right about this is, first of all, he was taken seriously by the military and others in moving all this along. Second of all, is in the media reaction. The media reaction has been, to make fun of him and to tease, especially some of the things he said, but it hasn't had a negative effect on the group as a whole or Lou Elizondo personally. They're all being taken very, very seriously because they have titles and positions that warrant that. Someone who is a defense intelligence expert and advisor, such as Mellon, or, Elizondo, who's in intelligence for the Pentagon. They're the ones who you're going to get the technical information from, not Tom. Tom is going to be like the marketing guy in any company who is kind of full of it, and it's just, there to say, hey, rah, rah, and this is cool, and this is great, and to keep the energy going, and to keep communication and connections with people going. But that's not the expert. In fact, when a salesperson or a marketing person tells you X, Y, and Z about the tech, anybody savvy in a corporation is going to say, yeah, right, and then actually go to the tech people to confirm whether or not that's true, because typically they're going to be told, well, out of all those points, most of those are inaccurate, but here's the real beef behind what it is. So yeah, I don't think it doesn't appear as though that has been damaging up until this point. If there are some major campaigns to discredit the groups in the future, which could happen, they may use that Tom against them. But so far we haven't seen it, I don't think.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan podcast is the one I'm sure you've. I've gotten so many emails about that, and it just didn't go well. It was not a good idea. No,
not at all. And I we see that Tom kind of feels that too, and that he has not been out in the media at all since that occurred. So it's been like a year and a half since we've heard from him.
Yeah, I think that was sometime I think it was actually in 2017 when he was actually on the Joe Rogan show. I don't remember exactly when. Yeah,
it was like mid to late 2017, which of course it was October 2017 when they announced To the Stars, and I believe it was just before that.
Oh, it was just before that. Wow, yeah. So that's good. I was, they are, like you said, the team for the most part is pretty amazing, and it really has. It has a lot of people talking about, their backgrounds, and wow, this is being taken serious by these people. So it is good.
And the UFO field, it's unfortunate because I think there's a level of professionalism and who was I talking to this with? I don't remember who, but there is this disconnect, I think, where they are not, many of them are not seeing things from the perspective of like the mainstream, which is damaging, because if, we want to be taken seriously, then you have to understand that. And, I think that just there's a lot of people who are discounting the credibility, the very high level of credibility of this To the Stars organization and the individuals involved. It's so high that even comments from the DoD's PR department do not hold water as compared to Harry Reid or Lou Elizondo or others in the organization. And we've seen that. The media doesn't even reference the DoD PR department, and they don't need to, because there's ample evidence of everything that they have said. And these documents that we're going to talk to Nick Pope about are even further, confirming that exactly what they said is true. And they also confirm similar leaked documents that George Knapp from KLAS in Las Vegas had been able to share months ago.
Now, do you actually feel comfortable teasing a little bit Nick Pope's FOIA?
Depends on what.
No, I just want to hear. I mean, it seems to me, I looked into it a little bit. It was actually going to be something I was going to talk about, like a news, story. But anyway, it sure seems to me on the outside so far, I haven't been able to actually read the documents. I know there's a copy online, but it's very tiny and hard to read. Sounds like the technology was taken serious, and it sounds like it's kind of geared to extraterrestrial.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the point. Is that that's a big point, and I guess because you make that observation, is that they're not talking about it. It's the program is Advanced Aerospace and Threat Identification Program, but and they're not talking about foreign technologies. They're talking about space propulsion technologies. So it goes to wonder, if you're looking at those documents and you're thinking, okay, what is the foreign technology they're looking at? It points to that this foreign technology is not Russian or Chinese, or, there's no reference to that. What there is reference to is space, that this technology is space related. So exactly what you're talking about. So that's another really important part of those papers.
There's even reference to the Drake equation, which,
exactly.
That kind of points it out right there.
Exactly. And, that's what Nick Pope brought up to Tucker Carlson on Fox News. That exact, point is that if they're referring to the Drake equation, that right there tells you the foreign parties that they're looking towards. So
pretty exciting. So I can't wait to have them. I can't wait to hear that interview. It should be great.
Be a lot of fun. Now, hey, I want to hear from you, if you don't mind sharing, about some of your recent interviews, because you've had some really cool people on to talk particularly about the Nimitz case, right? So,
yes.
Yeah, could you share maybe, I think it's the last 2 shows you've had focused on that.
Well, I have this show coming up tomorrow with Robert Powell, talking about any of the updates that he can share on the research on that. So that'll come up. But anyway, the last show I had a former guest of yours on as well, Tyler Rogoway, and writes for the War Zone. And I also had Vincent Aiello, and he is a former fighter pilot. He's also a Top Gun trainer, and he now is a commercial airline pilot. And he really, I asked him if he was going to have any trouble talking about UFOs, with his career in any type of way. And he said, he wasn't worried about it at all. And had some great conversations with him. And he actually has the Fighter Pilot podcast where he interviewed David Fravor, directly about the Nimitz case, and it was basically pilot to pilot talking. So it's a really great interview. I think you said you had that posted somewhere, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had that posted on the front page because, I think that's really important. And so as a fellow, a pilot, and how did he feel about Fravor's testimony?
100% credible. He said that, I like what he said. He said, before he actually sat and talked face-to-face with Fravor, who was a friend, a former friend, and he was actually on, Vincent was actually on the USS Nimitz during the encounter. Remembers?
Oh, wow.
But they were, he would see him in passing. There wasn't any direct contact at that point. But he does discuss, what happened. There was, people teasing him. There was a lot of ridicule at that time, because of that. But he said that prior to actually talking directly to David, that he thought, UFO people were just wackos. He said, I hope I don't offend anyone. He says, but I do. He says, but now I know that there's really something to this, and I think it's very interesting. Mm-hmm. He further went on to say, I asked him if he was going to, look into the topic more, and he said it's kind of like, golfing. It's something I might think is interesting, but he says I'm not really, unless it circles back around again, he says I'm not going to be exploring the topic. And I said, no, I'm not talking about on your show. I mean, personally, do you think that you might have more of an interest now that you think you think that David Fravor is credible? And he said, well, yeah, not to be honest, not really, So I think I think that's kind of fascinating that he might. I mean, to me, I think, I can only go by what I feel, and I just think it's such an important topic, and could mean so many changes in the world. Just that one thing, if there's actually intelligent life out there, and we know it for sure, and it's actually visiting us. I mean, if that's really what it is, I think that's major. And I'm a little surprised at that.
Yeah, and I agree with you. On the other hand, I can kind of see it because in a way, I even feel, and maybe you do too, I know Micah Hanks talks about this, and I agree with him, feeling agnostic about this whole field, in that it's really interesting to look into discoveries and advancements, but we may not, if not probably won't, really make much headway in our lifetimes. And, if you're a real student of this field and you look at even people like Dr. J. Allen Hynek, he passed away without really knowing a whole lot more. And so have many, many researchers come and gone, some spending the majority of their lives looking into this without much, a whole lot of knowledge necessarily, like real understanding being gained. So, however, it's still really interesting, and he may feel that way. It's just kind of like how we feel about, he probably feels, let's say, and no doubt Tyler Rogaway does, about certain technologies that they're really important, certain jet propulsion or other technologies that are cutting edge, but we don't pay attention to it. Even though it may affect our lives in that it makes air travel 10 times quicker and maybe 10 times safer for us in the next few years. But we're like, yeah, that's interesting. But we don't look into the details, even though it's something that will affect our lives. So I can see how, we just all have our interests in things that we're looking into. But it is funny. Some people in this field get really frustrated that others aren't freaking out and talking about this every day. But I could see why they wouldn't. It's not really going to affect his life, except for when he hears fellow pilots talking about UFO sightings, he may at least not make fun of them or take them more seriously.
Yeah, there's something I'm going to mention that Tyler was talking about. But another thing, though, I do have to say, commenting on what you just said there a minute ago, and that is you don't think or you feel as though that you probably won't know in your lifetime. I have said that many times on my show and felt that way also, but I don't know. Lately, I just seem to be having a feeling that we're going to know more, and we're going to know more fairly soon. Now, maybe people have said that for the last 70 years, and like you said, passed away without knowing anything extra. But I just have that feeling. It just feels like things are like the banana's being peeled back a little, and more is being revealed. Now, I don't know.
Well, I think we all have that feeling, and that's where things like 2012 happen. You know, we all feel something big's going to happen. So when people say 2012 is a year something big's going to happen, that feels right. That's got to happen. And then nothing does. However,
Right.
there is something to your argument in that, and this is another thing that I feel, you know, with a lot of the UFO community, not all of it, but a lot. There's this, you know, what's going on right now has literally never happened in the UFO field. This amount of credible information and witnesses coming forward about a secret program or these military encounters, this just has not happened like this in the past. The closest thing would be Blue Book, Project Blue Book, but Project Blue Book, as we know from Edward Ruppelt's book, who ran Blue Book in 1952, began the 1952 final Blue Book project. A lot of the Air Force's stance was anti-UFO, to really kind of, you know, get the public to quit being so fascinated with the topic. Whereas that wasn't Lou's intention. In fact, theirs was the opposite, was to actually look into the mystery of the whole topic. So it's a huge difference. And, you know, I think that, like, for instance, it's fun because George Knapp is like a little kid in a candy store. He is so excited about this moment in life because he's worked so hard, you know, towards looking at this topic. And he's been a part of some major investigations that have been revelatory. But a lot of this information he felt would never get out. And he didn't feel like, you know, we would have this level. And he really feels extremely excited and happy to be alive, is the way he put it. That during this time where so much information is coming forward, and I think that that's a justified perspective, and I think it you know, is an argument to justify your feelings too. That, you know, more is happening right now, and more may continue, probably will continue, and so, you know, the information could ramp up exponentially.
Yeah, so I was saying just a minute earlier that I was going to talk about something Tyler Rogaway said, a couple things. First of all, as I think he mentioned on your show, you know, throw out what is not, you know, what can be explained. That should be, he was calling himself a debunker. And I said, no, you're not. I think of a debunker as someone that takes a hoax and disproves it. I said, you're just explaining what people are thinking is a UFO. And he, you know, he thinks that's very important, and I do too, you know. And I like what he said. He said there's so much that can't be explained. You don't need to, you know, hang on the stuff that can be explained.
Exactly.
And it just takes up space. And I thought that was really good.
That is really good, and it's a great point. And I mean, I know Mark D'Antonio, you know, the photo and video analyst from MUFON, gets really frustrated when I talk about him debunking stuff. But he does, and I love it. And it's great because for that point right there, we need to get rid of the stuff that could be explained, focus on the truly anomalous, because that's, you know, our efforts well spent, as opposed to wasting our time with stuff. And that's why it's exciting. I don't know. I think you feel this way too. I get excited when something gets explained, even if it's mundane.
Yeah.
Because then we don't have to spend our time with that. We can focus on other better stuff.
Move on to the real stuff if you can. Yeah. And the second part of what he said, I think, is very interesting. And he was getting into the new technologies, you know, Black Project things that we don't know about. He said that he has, you know, from what he researches, that we're going to be seeing things in the sky that are military that we're not going to be able to explain. He said, you know, there's going to be a lot more of what people are considering UFOs that, you know, maybe just, you know, new technologies. And he said, you know, again, that the Air Force, as they have done in the past, may actually not mind if we call it a UFO. Kind of divert the attention of what it really is.
Yeah, I mean, some people argue that case, you can see this at the Scientific Coalition for Ufology, the SCU website, SCU-online, that there's this case, over Puerto Rico. Actually, at Open Minds, we got to kind of break the investigation of this case. And a lot of people argue that what is seen in this video, that, Mark, for instance, he hasn't put together his full argument, but he feels that it is something mundane. Others, especially the investigators, do not. And a lot of very credible people don't agree with him. But some argue that what that is could be just that, technology that is being tested out there. And I think that's a great point. I mean, drones have shown that. They've got sparkly lights on them, and people mistake them for UFOs all the time. But even with drone technology, the military could be developing. Like, my drone is a Spark, a DJI Spark, super tiny, but the lights are really bright. It can zoom around super fast. So, like, if the military souped up one of these things and let it autonomously, fly a couple hundred miles across the country on its own, or even put it in a mode where it can go to an area, examine and photograph the entire area that is maybe a few hundred or thousand miles away, and then come back, or while it's transmitting the data that it's, at the same time, it would look so tiny that you wouldn't recognize it as a military technology or something like that. So I think what he says makes a lot of sense.
Now, just for the listener out there, the Puerto Rico, I know you've interviewed a couple people on that. Mm-hmm. Puerto Rico UFO was in
Aguadilla.
Yeah, that was like in 2017 also, wasn't it? And
no, that one was earlier. Oops. What, 2000? Oh. When it occurred was something like 2009. When the paper came out was around 2016 right. Or 17. And who was one of the top investigators of that was Robert Powell, who you're having on your show.
Right. And Larry Cates.
Larry Cates was one of those. Rich Hoffman, Morgan Beale, and
Rich Hoffman.
And Carl Paulson. I think those were the leads. One or two other people I might be forgetting, and I apologize, but yeah.
Well, the weird thing about that is it skimmed through the water and never lost speed. I don't think there's anything.
Yeah,
I can't imagine technology that would do that.
Now, I think that's the part that is a little bit more difficult to prove, whether or not that happened. If that did happen, that would be very significant. They feel they can prove that pretty strongly, and maybe they can, but even the aerodynamics, or at least the flight path, that I think that they have demonstrated, and the other aspects, the physical aspects of the object are very unique, very strange.
And that was a gun camera too, right?
That was gun camera, and this is an important point, and that doesn't fit actually Mark's theory. Mark's theory is that it's a balloon. So, and it is important, I think, to review this theory, because Mark makes a very excellent point on the nature of photography and videography when it comes to moving cameras. So you see this object traveling over from the ocean over the land, loops around, and then travels back out to the ocean. Well, Mark points out that this aircraft is essentially doing a half circle around the object. So when you see the background moving quickly, that doesn't necessarily mean the object's moving quickly. He feels the object is actually moving very slowly. It's a balloon. And that it gives the appearance of moving quickly because the background is moving. And he's got a good point, because that is a phenomenon. I believe it's called parallax. And that does give the wrong impression. And that happens often. But right after this break, I'll make the argument as to why he I feel that, and many others feel he's off on. And he's still working on proving his perspective. But we've got to take another break. We'll be right back after this short musical interlude, or for those of you listening on other outlets such as KGRA, you'll hear some commercials. Be right back. Welcome back to Open Minds UFO Radio. I'm your host, Alejandro Rojas, and we have with us Mr. Martin Podcast UFO Willis.
Can do.
Yep. With a can-do attitude. So here's where I think we just talked about the parallax, where the slow-moving object can be looking fast on a video. However, there is, I think, that the group argues, and I think they have a strong argument, is that it appears this object is moving behind a pole. And so that's a big deal. That would demonstrate that it is moving. And, when you do all the line alignments and everything, I mean, it really does look like it is moving. And what Mark is also doing is discounting the witness testimony, which, as a video analyst or a photo analyst, you don't take into account the witness testimony. So that's good for him to do. Here's why, at least in one phase of your analysis, you don't want to take into witness testimony. It's because if you just give this photo or video to an analyst like Mark, don't even tell them about the rest of the case and let them see what they determine. If they come back with an answer that is similar to what the witnesses tell you, then you have a stronger case. Then you have better, corroboration or better of the story, because that means the data that is able to be retrieved from the photo or video corroborates what the witness is saying. So that's what's really important, that piece of data, that photo or video, has to stand on its own as far as if it's a good piece of evidence or not. So that's why that's important. But in this case, we have the pilots of the Homeland Security or Customs plane that captured this. So we have some very credible witness data, and the credibility of the witness data is extremely important. Some people say, oh, you can put someone away with witness testimony, but there's a caveat to that. There's a lot that goes into that. And expert testimony counts 100 million times better than just a civilian novice testimony, layman testimony. In this case, you can consider these pilots expert testimony. But here's the part of their testimony that really blows Mark's the balloon theory out as well, is that this whole thing started, it was dark out, and they saw a light. They saw an illuminated object out in the ocean moving towards the land. And that's how this whole thing started. The light then turned out, but they had aimed their cameras over there to capture, to see whatever this thing was, and they were able to capture it on their infrared while it was invisible to the naked eye because the light had gone out, and then they tracked this object. So we have witness testimony that it traveled in the manner in which the SCU group estimates it did travel. So their estimation does corroborate what the witnesses had said. And of course, a balloon is not going to have a light on it and that it can turn on and off. And plus, the balloon was out over the ocean and then moved into the land and moved back to the ocean. So, yeah, I really think these guys are really onto something, and a lot of the military experts that have taken a look at it agree. So I think it's a really good case. But
now, did they get any radar returns on that?
No radar returns. But there was like at least one aircraft that was delayed because they were told that something was in the area. But I don't think we know exactly why. Of course, Robert Powell's the expert on this. He would know all the very minute details. But I don't think they gave a reason as to why that was delayed. So they didn't say we had something on radar or anything like that. But,
I remember speaking. Pardon me. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that I think Robert was the one who was able to at least do the investigation into the radar aspect.
I was just saying that I remember speaking with Bruce Maccabee a number of years ago, and he said that the witness testimony was as important as the image. But I understand the way you put that, and that is that, first have them, look at the data, and then, I think that is important because that is, something right in front of you. And then,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, if you were a field investigator that worked with Bruce Maccabee, you would be surprised he said that because it was frustrating. I was a field investigator when Bruce Maccabee was the photo analyst before Mark D'Antonio was. And that's where I learned this was from Bruce, because I would send him stuff and he'd say, well, it looks like this, this, and that. But he would not take into account the witness testimony. And so I would get really frustrated until I could discuss this with him and understand it better. Because in his at least initial photo analysis, and that's different than the entire case as a whole. So for the photo analysis, he would do just what Mark said. He would not take into witness testimony into account at all. He would look at it and say, and it was a good point, because then I knew that even though this person took this picture of a light in the sky at night, that data from that photo did not serve as good evidence to support what the witness was saying. Even though we get so excited, oh my gosh, we have a photo. It's really not big of a deal. That's why photo analysis our photos aren't really a lot of times great evidence or data to bolster a case, because it doesn't support or it doesn't prove what the witness is saying. So you're then left just to rely on the witness testimony on its own, because the photo doesn't really lend any. It's an interesting thing. It's interesting for the media and the layman who wants to look into the case, but it's not as interesting as a piece of evidence when you're analyzing whether it's a substantial piece of evidence. So he did the same thing as Mark, but I think what he was telling you is when you take a step back and you're looking at the case as a whole, that's when the witness testimony plays a big role.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact context, but you're probably right.
Yeah, because I used to get so frustrated. And so before, and that's how I learned it all, because I was like, you're not taking into account the witness testimony. And he's like, well, it just, from what the witness says, and the evidence they're showing in the photo just does not show anything. It's not conclusively anomalous at all, which is a great point, and that's the limitations of photos and videos. They got to be really extraordinary and we don't really have extraordinary photo or video evidence, really extraordinary.
Well, there's always CGI.
Yeah, and then there's CG on top of that, and there's a lot of issue. So it's a really good point. And
I don't think, the fact that something is not picked up on radar seems to not really matter, because there's case after case after case where there was never a radar return on an object that people clearly see, which is, I don't think it, it's probably just another capability of whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. But what's exciting are the cases that do have radar, and there are quite a few. So the Nimitz has some radar data that comes with it. And speaking of Tyler Rogaway, there are a couple great cases that he, broke to the media and wrote about that had some anomalous radar returns as well, especially that Colorado, Utah, I think it was
Oregon?
Oregon. The Oregon case. That was California, Oregon case that had the radar, and that adds a lot. In fact, there was another case in New Mexico he wrote about that got more media attention, but all we had there was some pilots talking back and forth about something they saw, where he really likes this California, Oregon case better because it not only has the witness testimony from the pilots and the audio of that, but it also has radar returns of something really strange. So,
plus they scrambled a jet after that too, I do believe.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the jet got there too late; it was already gone. But you're right. And that other really crazy part of that case is that you had the FAA people talking about should we have the commercial aircraft follow this object and not land in Oregon, and they decided against that because they didn't know if whatever this object was hostile, so they didn't want to put civilians in harm's way. So they let the commercial aircraft land, or the civilian aircraft land, and that's why they lost visual of the object. By the time the jets got there that were scrambled, the object was nowhere to be found.
Wow. Also, the conversation I had with Tyler recently, it seems to me that the FAA has loosened up as far as, being cooperative in information when it comes to UFOs. At least they are listening to him. It may be because, he's a journalist and he writes about aviation, and maybe he's connected in that way, but they have actually shared a lot of things with him. And as you know, that's not the way it used to be.
No, not at all. And they wouldn't share anything. They would just refer you to New Fork, which is a website ran by Peter Davenport, one guy, that collects UFO sightings, or they may refer you to Bigelow to just report your sighting. But that was about it. And which was shocking that they wouldn't want to know or look into it, and they wouldn't share information. But like you said, even Tyler has been shocked at the level of cooperation he's received from them regarding these cases he's looked into.
Right. Even radio, I think even radio recordings, conversations, and, pretty amazing.
It is. And what would be interesting to ask Robert Powell if he has had that same experience. I have not approached the FAA for anything in the last few years. I used to when I was a MUFON field investigator, and I would get that runaround. But I believe Robert Powell has, because he's so actively researching these cases, that he would probably... It'd be interesting to see if, from a UFO investigator's perspective, if they've had that same kind of experience of the FAA being more forthcoming.
Right. I wonder if they hang on to the material from past, incidents. For, just thinking back to like 2006 O'Hare, that I wonder if because they wouldn't share anything about that really. And you wonder if they have that somewhere archived.
Yeah, I wonder. I know that recently Robert had shared with me that the way you access radar changed, and I think he said you can't FOIA FAA data anymore, so you have to FOIA military radar installations to get radar data. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, you probably read this, that Harry Reid purportedly is pushing for more UFO research?
Yeah, he just had this interview where they asked him about his UFO stuff, and which is great. He did not shy away from it. He said, yeah.
Right.
I started this program. I'm happy I did. And he said, we need to look into this stuff. It's important. And he welcomes, fellow politicians and others to, advocate and to continue, looking into what he feels is a very important topic.
Right. And I'm really glad that he's doing that because, it he might start the ball rolling. I mean, he wasn't just a senator. He was I think he was a whip, wasn't he also?
Yes. Well, he was the majority leader.
The majority leader. That's pretty big.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So he was big, very influential, and I think that's really important. And, of course, we're in a period of time, and that's what was my last interview with Nick Pope, where we have these congressional subcommittees talking to David Fravor and other witnesses and people involved with the phenomena. And, Lou Elizondo, it's something we talked about recently, but he also wrote about this, that he's like, this shouldn't be the gospel according to Lou. I'm not a spokesperson. I ran the project. It wasn't my job to share information, and it still isn't. So but what it is his job to do, and what they're trying to do, is to get those people with the information to be forthcoming with information and to share information. And that means it's a lot of, that aspect is a lot of behind the scenes work that we won't see. But we can get little hints at the fruits of those efforts, and we have. And that's what Nick Pope wrote this Guardian article about, that we interviewed him about last, which is that, these subcommittees have been discussing and having briefings and talking to people. And so things have been moving forward in that aspect. We don't know exactly what To the Stars or Elizondo specifically has done. He's alluded to a little bit, but they are, like he wrote in that article, greasing the wheels to make all this happen. And so it sounds like, and from what I understand from various interviews, is that there was more pushback when he first left than there is now. And so things are moving in a very positive direction that way, which who knows? I mean, that leads for an interesting possibility as far as the future goes. Is, will we have then an opening of this topic, and so much so that there is another public-facing investigative group that the government or the military sponsors or creates. And if that's so, how will the public react to that? Certainly the conspiracy-minded are not going to believe anything they have to say. And honestly, we know in the past there's been so much spin or just false information, unfortunately. I hate to say that, but we just know we've got that video out there. I've got a video about where I go over government secrecy and UFOs, and, we haven't been told the truth over the years. So how can we believe they'll tell us the truth in the future? And so it's going to be interesting to see what results of this. But kind of to your point, that things seem to be unrolling and the banana, peel keeps being pulled back. It seems as though something's going to happen. Right.
I wonder how Lou Elizondo and others over at To the Stars Academy really view the UFO community, or if they just think they want to get this information to the public, and a lot of the UFO community are bashers or fringe or whatever. I wonder what they really think about that, if that ever comes up in an interview.
Well, I'll tell you that I think that I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, misrepresent what anybody has said, nor share things they don't really feel they want to be shared. However, I think what you're asking is an important question, and I think that there has been a larger negative pushback than was expected by all parties. And I think that has, my guess would be, and I think it really has, at least in a bit, disheartened some of them a bit. And I know I think it's a similar experience that Bigelow went through when he was doing more public-facing work in this arena, and he's shared his experience with George Knapp in interviews before on Coast to Coast, and that reminds me of a line of information I want to talk about here too. But Bigelow has a lot of money. He wanted to really spend time and effort researching this field. He funded a lot of the top researchers in their work, and you would think that the community would be very positive about all of that. But that's unfortunately not what happened. You have all of these haters and naysayers, and in fact, there's a huge amount of negativity. And although Bigelow had that experience, I don't know that... I don't think Lou might not have even noticed that or been aware, but I don't know if he... And I don't even know if Tom would have felt that they would have faced the same thing, but they certainly are. And so I think that is disheartening for all of them a bit, but they can move past it because they're very passionate about their end results.
I don't think that, along those lines, I don't think that we would, in the community, possibly, George Knapp may know something before others, but and he's a journalist, of course, but he does, get involved in this topic. But I don't think as a whole we would be privy to any new information any more than anyone else, is kind of where I'm going with this. Oh, yeah.
Well, although, some of us who have relationships are somewhat. We do get to find out before everyone else. I mean, I got phone calls from... I got the call from DeLong before he announced To the Stars in October, so I could be ready for it. Even now, I'm being given clues as to the future of what they're working on and may be able to share with people, some of which I can share and some I can't, which is not uncommon. I mean, often when I'm invited as a journalist for the press to especially something regarding entertainment, I'm told, I'm given all the information, but told this is embargoed for a month or 2 or 3 or 4. You can release this on March 22nd, and I keep in close contact so I know when the embargo's lifted so I can share the information. So it's a common practice, especially with the media. And in that aspect, at least those of us who are kind of UFO journalists are given some insight, kind of like, Ryan Sprague, I know, and you and I have been given some Project Blue Book, material before the rest of the public, so we can help prepare to release it when it's releasable and get excited about it. So, for instance, you had all the episodes. You still have them. You've seen all the episodes of Project Blue Book, even though they haven't all come out. We're only maybe halfway in, and but you don't reveal what's in the last 3 episodes until after they're out. Yeah. So
someone just has to make me an offer. That's all.
But along those lines, in the last minute or so that we have here, is that what really blows my mind is in my last story about Project Blue Book, my review of the 3rd episode.
Mm-hmm.
I reference because in that episode, a car was stopped and there was an really kind of these shocks, like electrical shocks, but, and the shocks I haven't heard of, but electrical malfunctions or issues with vehicles and stopping during UFO sightings have happened.
Oh, a lot.
One of these cases, that's a really good case, happened just a few years ago, and 2009, I believe it was, and it was a STAR Team project. The STAR Team is the group that was funded and working with Bigelow. And so this is the group that people said, oh, it was all secret and they were hiding stuff from the public. No, not at all. In fact, I wrote about all of those great cases that Bigelow funded and they were able to research. It's totally public. There was no hiding of anything. And it's just a great case where this person saw this cigar-shaped craft with lights on it. It was above his car. His car stopped. When the STAR team guys got there, were able to fly out there with great equipment thanks to Bigelow. They were able to find out that the car had a very strong, strange electromagnetic field to it. So it's a really great case. And it was just funny reading that story again and sharing it with everybody, because I haven't looked at that story since this New York Times article came out. And the funny thing is I didn't know that back then that funding Bigelow was spending on that project was coming from the Department of Defense. So
yeah, that is amazing.
It's really crazy, huh?
Yeah, well, I know we're out of time, but I just wanted to just throw this out, that there was someone in Russia that had a very, very similar experience, cigar-shaped UFO, made all the cars stall in a mountain pass. It's really great. Talk directly to the person.
That is a very similar situation.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, it happens. Weird stuff, man.
Right.
All right. Well, that's it for the show. So thank you so much, Martin, for joining us and, spending the time to talk about some of the news out there. Got some great shows coming up. Of course, you can check out Martin on Podcast UFO.
.com. Thank you.
.com. .com. Thank you, or just .com?
Both. Thank you. Thank you, Alejandro.
My pleasure. Thank you. So just a couple of things that I want to remind people. Please do go to the Alejandro Advantage, or if you're on my social media, just check that out. And go check out some of my live shows from Thursday evening. Martin's there often.
Mm-hmm.
Chase Kletsky was there this last time, actually. And some other people. So they are a lot of fun, and I go over a lot of news and then give you some insight and background, and then go into some of these other stories like I was talking about earlier. And hopefully you've seen on, also you can find these on my social media. You can also find these on my blog, my new blog, alejandrotrojas.com. You can't find all of these things now, but I'll be posting them up real soon, but I'm going to keep that updated for everyone. But you know what I put there, and you should check this out too, Martin, it's kind of fun, at alejandrotrojas.com. I made a list of a lot of the media things I've been involved with, and it's a really long list. I was surprised. Wow. But you can find links to lots of the videos, interviews I've done for news. You can see a link to my taking the Kardashians to Area 51, stuff like that, and tons and tons and tons of mainstream articles where they've mentioned my work or interviewed me. So it's a lot of fun. I was kind of proud putting that list together, but I'll be putting a lot of stuff there so you can see it as well as my social media. So if you want to watch those videos, please do, and then take out my Den of Geek articles, because I do give a lot of background into those Blue Book cases. And then, for instance, when there are phenomena that happened in the television show that weren't about the case they were covering, but did happen in other high-profile cases, then I review those other high-profile cases with links as well. And I also include links back to the original Blue Book files on all of these cases as well, so you can go actually see the Project Blue Book files. And I don't see any other reviewers or writers who are writing about Project Blue Book linking to the Blue Book files for some reason. So if you want to go see those and find out how you can read all the Blue Book files, go check out those articles. But I also, don't forget, International UFO Congress. We've got more information forthcoming about speakers and tickets in the next month or so, but we've got lots of cool products that you can see at the store, so check out the store. And then, and we've got free videos up. So speaking of some of the new stuff coming out, we've got a debate with Stanton Friedman and Jeremy Corbell. And I did want to mention, I saw Nick Pope at the Snowfest, Alien Snowfest in Big Bear, California. Karen just decided in the last minute, hey, let's go out there and see if they'll give us a table. So we did, and we sold some stuff and hung out with some of our friends. So it was a lot of fun. Got to talk to people. But Stanton was there. So,
oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
It was great to see him. And we did get, because I keep making sure that he's going to do it, we did get a confirmation he will be speaking at the UFO Congress, his last presentation at the UFO Congress. So we'll be doing something special with that and him at the UFO Congress, because he's, of course, such an important, great guy. And I know Jeremy felt he won that debate with Stanton over Bob Lazar, but I don't think everybody feels that way, especially if you look in the comments. And I didn't feel it was really one-sided at all. So that was a lot of fun, but you can see that on the UFO Congress YouTube page. You can watch that video.
Yeah, I'm interested to see that.
Oh, you haven't seen that yet?
No.
Oh, yeah, you'll have to go check that out. So, yep, just the UFO Congress YouTube page, where we also have a lot of other great lectures up there for free. We have our UFO Jeopardies that were a lot of fun, where we had kind of a game show with UFO researchers. And I've got a talk up there from Lee Spiegel, which is really good because Lee's awesome, of course. And so check that out. Otherwise, I want to thank Micah Hanks for the opening and close music. People are always asking about it because it's so cool. Or not Micah Hanks, it's his brother Caleb Hanks. Caleb Hanks for the opening and close music. In fact, go look for Caleb Hanks on Patreon if you want to get more of that music. He shares it all for free, and he's creating new music that's super cool all the time. I love it. Thanks to Systematics for the bumper music. And here's the end part where we say thank you to the people, Martin, just so you're ready.
Oh, yes.
And thank you all the listeners for being here. Thank you so much for coming and patronizing the show. Until next time, adios, muchachos.